Well, the title was very long. I'm a bureaucrat, so let's start with wrecking your lunch or your appetite here. Because if you're looking at the situation, let me go back here. On the first part of the picture, this is how the public sees our industry. Basically, that's how it is. We may differ in the opinion, but that's how it's being seen. It's basically like an old battleship. It's hugely powerful, but unfortunately, it's inefficient, it's inflexible, and to some people, it's actually downright frightening. So, my vision for this, for the future, is actually the picture on the bottom. How can we change our industry to be like the picture at the bottom, which is clean, fast, small, flexible, efficient? I think that's one of the major things that we are thinking about for the future in Europe. And one of the catalysts, if you could call it like that, could be the Horizon 2020 program. It's of course not everything, but as I said, it's a catalyst, or could be a catalyst. It's a single program that combines social challenges, industrial competitiveness, and excellence in science, not necessarily in this order. It has a budget of 79 billion euros, and now you say, well, that's a lot of money. But in reality, it's not a lot of money, because if you spread this all over Europe, it's a small part of the money. And that's why it has to act like a catalyst rather than a funding agency where you get all the money for being in part of this. And when I've said this, I also would like to say that you should not be in Horizon 2020 to earn money from being there. You should be in Horizon 2020 because you then, together with the other businesses which are there, can catalyze your business for the future and then earn the profit later on. And that basically means that we are focusing more on innovation. And I will get back to that part a little bit later. It means that we are focusing on industrial deployment of key enabling technologies. For us, that is absolutely the key, to focus on these key enabling technologies and then to look at how can we deploy these things through the industry. In Horizon 2020, in comparison to the old scheme, what we are doing now is we try to have much faster grants, and we have a simplified access for all stakeholders. But that said, I mean, it's still a bureaucratic institution. You cannot expect just to get your grant tomorrow. You have to be prepared, but you also have to collaborate. So where are we sitting? Industrial technologies is basically in the middle pillar here. You have on one side the excellent science, industrial leadership, and societal challenges. And inside the leadership and enabling in industrial technologies, the Industrial Technologies Directorate is. And we basically try to be a little bit in between these sectors and focus very much on how we can deploy the technologies for the industry. Let me go back a little bit to the start of Horizon 2020, because it's a new program. It has a new title. Earlier it was called FP7, and everyone thought it was going to be FP8. We tried Horizon 2020 because we wanted to open the mind of the people for how this program should be used for the future. So far, we've actually had 65 calls launched for 2014. We've had more than 38,000 proposals coming in. We engage a lot of experts like yourself, and I would at this point like to promote the experts in our database. Also for you, we would like to see you as experts in Brussels. That's a good investment, not only for you as a person, but also for your company when you have to make applications for the future. Therefore, we attract newcomers, and we have increased the industrial participation because this is one of the key elements of the program. So far, we've had quite a positive reaction, not only to the innovation actions, but also to the SME instrument. The problem is that when you're popular and when the money is limited, you have an oversubscription. And we do that in Horizon 2020. But that's inevitable. We do not have an open pot of money that we can just distribute. And if we want to compete for the best ideas to get funding, then we will have an oversubscription. And this is actually depicted here in the slide here. Okay. You see that there is a very strong uptake of the instrument, for the SME instruments. We had, in the first call, we have 2,600 applications. That is absolutely radical for a new call. The problem is that we could only select 155. That's devastating. That's less than 10% success rate. But we need to improve on that part later on. And I think that that's also a symptom of the time, because you've seen that many governments are slashing the funds for research, for SMEs, and those which need it the most, those are those that you can see in green on the screen. You've seen Spain decreasing their funds dramatically. Same for Italy throughout years. UK has done a little bit of the same, even though I cannot really comment on your domestic things. So in Horizon 2020, in the leadership on industrial technologies, we have a common approach across the ICT program, across the nanotechnologies program, the biotechnology and the space, because we would like to emphasize on technology development, on pilot scales, on deployment of technologies. That means prototyping, product validations, and so on and so forth. And as I said already at the beginning, one of the things that we would like to focus on is the key enabling technologies. I will come back to that in the next slide. But first and foremost also, when we are talking about this, we would like to focus on leveraging private investment, because it's not only about public investments, it's also about the private investments. Because the customers at the other side, they have to see that it makes sense for them to be a part. Because if it does that, then they're also willing to invest. We know that from the past. Okay. The PPPs, or the public-private partnerships, we see as being crucial to implement these key enabling technologies related activities. So what are they? Well, basically key enabling technologies, they are strategic technologies, and we hope that they can drive competitiveness and growth opportunities for the whole of Europe. But at the other side, we also need to look at these technologies for how can they actually support the societal challenges that we are facing in the future. If we want to have funding for doing science and technology, we also have to sell this to the general public. They have to be able to look at us, and we have to be able to look them in the eye and say, we are spending these kind of money also for your benefit. And that comes back to one of the things that we talked, I can't remember exactly who was it, that said this is very, very difficult to translate to the general public. These technologies, they are often very knowledge and capital intensive, so we need to see how can we actually lift this up to a higher level. And finally, they cross many different sectors. And we believe that in the interface between these technologies, that's actually where you get the new innovations for the future, the new breakthrough technologies that we need. When we are looking at these key enabling technologies, we also have to look at the value chain of innovation, basically. So it's not enough just to translate technology into new products. You also need to have the knowledge to be able to get this done. So we need to start at a little bit more fundamental level. That means with the future and emerging technologies, which has a much longer scope for the technology translation. Then, as I said before, you have to look at what is it that the society needs for you to do. Because it may be that you can come up with something that is absolutely senseless and which for a few periods of time will give you some money. But it has to make sense for the society in the end that you're doing it. And if you do not have the industry to take these technologies up to the next level and provide the necessary products for this, then you're not going to get there. So we want to use the LIGHT program to boost the industrial deployment of these technologies. We have an impact-oriented approach. I think that already goes with what I said before. We want to look at how can I gain the highest possible impact in this. And that means we would like to span technology levels which basically go from 3 to 8. We do not want to do really fundamental science. That is a national problem. We cannot deal with that at the European level, at least not as a collaborative research. So we go from 3 to 8. But in reality, we also know that all the companies which are sitting here in the audience, you're all competitors at one level or another. And therefore, very often we will not go to 8, we will stop at 7. Only in very rare cases we will go to 8. A catalyst for all this thing will be to look at the commercialization and how can we help, for instance, SMEs to commercialize these things. That means we need to look not only at the technology itself, but also things like standardization, measurements, and how can we attract capital to help SMEs. One of the things that have been talked about already today is synergy between research and industry, and that's immensely important for us. I think that what we need to establish here, not only between research and industry, but also between industries, is trust. I've seen in the few years that I've done this, that it was basically impossible to get the industries to talk to each other. They were sitting around and just waiting for the academics to talk and then to see what they could get along. So we had to make a transition in this and get them to trust each other. We tried that in the F3 factory project that I actually showed the picture on the first slide, and it actually helps. When suddenly people are talking about their technologies, you create this trust. They don't go away with all your inventions. You develop them together. And that's very much a key, especially when you're talking about the SMEs. So for us, it's very important to have these public-private partnerships because we can then, with those, we can implement or deploy the technologies. And just to give you an overview of the public-private partnerships which exist, it's a very busy slide, but you have basically joint technology initiatives and then you have contractual PPPs. Contractual PPPs are the ones here, which is part of SPIRE. I think most of you know this, the Factory of the Future, and on the other side, the Joint Technology Initiative, which is the bio-based industries. I don't want to go too much into the differences between those. But basically, what is a contractual PPP? Well, it's quite simple. The EU and the industry, they go together. They set some common objectives, and then they have a cross-sectorial implementation of these. And the activities are open to all, not only to the actors which are embedded inside the public-private partnership, but to everyone. Hopefully, that could have an impact on jobs, growth, and social benefits. Why do we do this? Sorry. It's because we would like to see that there is a long-term commitment and strategy. It's one of the things that we talked about just before. We need this long-term strategy that people can be sure that even after next election, that there will still be the same line of thought for going there. We like to have increased efficiency because we all know that in this industry, we need the efficiency to be able to be competitive. And then we would like to cover the whole of the value chain because we cannot just remove one bottleneck. We need to widen the whole innovation chain. So I would like to spend the last 5 minutes to talk about SPIRE. SPIRE is one of these PPPs, and I think that most of you already know this, so I don't want to dwell too much with the nuts and bolts, but I'm actually quite happy that Rodney Townsend is here today, because he's one of the chief architects behind the SPIRE and the collaboration in the process industry. So why is this considered a strategic domain? I don't think I need to say too much. It's a lot of workers that are a lot of jobs that goes into the process industry, loads of different enterprises, 450,000 it says here, and the turnover is staggering. So the problem is that due to the nature of these, what you do here, you are extremely energy dependent. Basically, 20 to 25% of all known resources on the face of this planet go through the process industry. And if we cannot save resources, by that I mean both energy and material resources, then we are not going to get to the targets that are set for Horizon 2020. So we have to make sure that not only does the industry stay strong here in Europe, but that we can compete on a global level, and that we can do that in a good and competitive manner. So why should we support Europe? You'd say these are hugely powerful companies. But the problem is that developing new technologies, changing the infrastructure, and lots of the money which you are spending in the process industry is in the ground. You cannot just take it up and change it. So if we want to change this, then we also need to support this. To have long-term investments, also with longer return of investment timeframes. And some of them are at very high risk. So we should, by doing that, we should also create the critical mass to actually advance on this. So why is there the need for SPIRE? We need to work together with the industry to actually address the industrial needs. And by that, I mean that we from the European Commission, we would like to actually act as a catalyst in this reaction. We don't want to go in and destroy or direct what you want to do. We want to listen to what the industry has to say, and then to translate that into a multi-annual framework that allows you also to fulfill your needs. Like this, we can hope that there will be faster technology transfer and market uptake. The objectives of SPIRE are depicted here. We should try to reduce the fossil fuel dependency. I know it's very easy said, but it's not so easy done. But if we want to reduce this by 30% in 2020, we need to make a huge effort. And also, we need to look at new ways to use non-renewable feedstock, so that we use them only where they are needed, not just because they are cheap. So it's clear that we need to use more renewables. We need to reduce and reuse the resources we have, and also cross-sectoral. That's what many people call industrial symbiosis. I think I'm a big believer in that, to be honest with you. We also need to reduce the water footprint of the process industry, because I think that one of the next problems that are going to face us is exactly the water. And then I will not talk about the CO2 equivalent, because I think you've already heard enough about that. But my vision, basically, and the vision that Rodney and Klaus and a number of other actors, they worked on at the time when we started all this work, was actually this picture. So you start with some energy, some raw materials, solvents, water, packaging and stuff like that, and you go through the process industry. And hopefully, by optimizing this process, you get more products out. You get less CO2, you get less byproducts and the other things. And those things that you do get out, because of course you cannot abolish this part. You try to recycle those and reuse them in as new feed, as new materials that you can use. Okay. If you do this, for instance, like in the factory of the future, you can really reuse quite a lot of this material. And now there is a lot of talk about CO2 being reused as well as an energy storage. I don't want to go into this debate, which is a little bit a political debate as well, but I think that it's a very interesting challenge for all of us to try and see how this could potentially be done. The particularities of the PPP calls, and this is basically like my promotion slide for you to participate in the PPP, is that we involve the industry to solve your problems in the work program. So you are also the master of the work program together with the European Commission. We have a lot of experts from the industry when we're evaluating the proposals. So that more than 50% basically of the experts that are coming to Brussels to evaluate your proposals also are people like yourself. We like to try and do one-stage evaluation to reduce time to grant. I think that's very important. That's also what we've heard from the industry, and that's what is done throughout all the PPPs, that we have one-stage evaluations. And many of the topics that we are covering in this work program are actually demo topics, pilot plans, and things like that. So for us, the exploitation of results has a very high priority, and that's why within the proposals that you have to write to this program, you also have to include an outline business plan, so that we can see what you want to use the products or the technologies for in the future. Last but not least, this program is subject to exactly the same rules and regulations as the whole of the Horizon 2020 calls. That means you do not have to change anything in comparison to your normal Horizon 2020 proposals. And that is a difference between participation in the joint technology initiatives, where there are different rules. And then last, if you need any more information, you can always contact me in Brussels. My door is usually open. But I would like to work together with you to try to rejuvenate the process industry, because otherwise in 2050 you end up like a wreck which is at the bottom of the sea bottom, and I would very much like that not to see. Thank you for your attention.